Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Innocent Until Proven Guilty. This will be Part 10, Chapter 10, entitled Class Reveal. Shouta did not want to do this. With every fiber of his being, Shouta did not want to do this. He wanted to stay in the apartment, be a beacon of support to the kid who desperately needed it right now. Not air the kid's innocence to a group of teens, a majority of whom broke his trust this week. He knew the afternoon spent in the apartment had helped, that Midoriya seemed more relaxed now that he was reading on the couch in his living room. Despite that, though, leaving still felt wrong. Shouta was tense, seated next to Hisashi, and he knew his husband could tell from the way he placed a reassuring hand on his knee. The man didn't look up from his papers, though. He knew him well enough to know what support he needed. Knowing he couldn't delay any longer, he took a deep breath and stood. Instantly, he felt Midoriya's eyes on him. "I have to head downstairs to meet with Tsukauchi and Nedzu now," he said softly to the room. He turned to Midoriya. The kid had a resigned look on his face that made him look much older than a first-year student. But he didn't say anything. "You'll stay here with Hisashi. Once we're done, Nedzu would like us to move your things into the apartment across the hall. Did you want to help with that? Or would you rather stay here and we take care of it?" The boy seemed surprised by the question, but for the life of him, Shouta didn't know why. He waited patiently as Midoriya seemed to think it over. "I'd like to help," the boy said softly. "But could we ask Shouta to maybe help too?" The question caught Shouta a bit off guard, and he nearly found himself smirking at the red tint of the boy's cheeks. At least the kid seems aware of his feelings, then. "That's fine. I'll pull him aside after we talk to the class and see if he'd be willing to help," he assured. "I have no doubt he will." He couldn't resist a smirk that time, especially as Hisashi attempted to conceal his laugh with a cough. Midoriya just smiled, seemingly satisfied with the answer. After he explained he'd be back to grab them once the talk with the students was done, Shouta made his way out of the apartment and downstairs to the common room, where the rest of Class 1A was waiting. The room was near silent when he arrived, which for his class was unheard of, excluding the past week. All the students were seated around the common room. While some had taken up residence on the floor, the majority had managed to fit themselves onto the various couches. At a small table off to the side, Todoroki and Bakugo sat together. Bakugo's hands were fisted on the tabletop, and Todoroki was casting an icy glare around the room at the other students. Ida was sitting on a couch next to Uraraka. Both seemed calm despite the tense atmosphere. Asui was on the floor in front of them. She had her arms wrapped around her knees, and she was looking off to the side. On another couch sat the remainder of Bakugo's typical friend group, with Mina and Kaminari sandwiched between Sero and Kirishima. They were each whispering to one another and seemed a bit nervous. The rest of the class was scattered around and quiet. Tsukauchi and Nedzu weren't quite here yet, so Shouta settled himself against the wall and decided to address the Hellions. "I take it you all know why you're here." A few of the kids were startled hearing his voice, but most had already seen him arrive, and those were the ones nodding at him. Ida was the only one to vocalize a response, although without his usual fervor. "Yes, Sensei. Principal Nedzu informed us that you had information for us regarding the traitor." Shouta grunted in acknowledgement and said nothing more as Nedzu and Tsukauchi were walking in the door already. The students sat up straighter as they made their way into the room. Nedzu, chipper as ever, decided to address the students. "Good evening, students," he began, receiving a murmur of responses in return from the kids. "We have asked you all to join us here today so we may inform you of some updates on your suspicions, if you will." The phrasing seemed to set a few students on edge. More noticeably, Ida, and Uraraka. Now please let it be known that we as a staff did not feel your suspicion held true merit. However, seeing as you are young and determined, we knew it would be best to investigate in an attempt to ease your concerns. Nedzu paused briefly and let his beady eyes scan the room. Since some of you were convinced of the guilt of your fellow student, we felt it necessary to conduct an interrogation. What would that prove, though? Wouldn't he just lie? Uraraka spoke up, causing Shouta to sigh. Ah, yes, a valid question indeed. Please note that Midoriya-kun was under the influence of a truth serum for the duration of his questioning. Nedzu's tone was too chipper to drop a bombshell like that. Whispers broke out around the room, along with shocked expressions. Shouta could see concern on Todoroki's face. He's still not used to such emotion from the teen. That not enough for you, round face, or you gonna shut up and let them explain shit? Bakugo growled out lowly, not even looking at the girl in question. Uraraka, for her part, merely huffed and turned back to Nedzu. Now, Detective, if you would introduce yourself, and we shall get started. Now Masa cleared his throat. Right. Hello, everyone. I'm Detective Tsukauchi, and I work with the Musutafu Police Department. Some of you I met after the incident at the USJ a while back. What some of you may not know is I have what's known as a lie detector quirk. I conducted the questioning of Midoriya Izuku along with Aizawa and Nedzu. Therefore, in addition to the truth serum, I am able to confirm all of Midoriya's responses were true. This seemed to settle the class a bit, as they all listened attentively. Now Masa continued. Now this questioning was recorded, and we are here to share parts of it with you today. We want you to be aware that what you're about to hear is the truth without any doubt, he said while pulling out the recording device he'd used earlier in Nedzu's office. Excuse me, sir, Ida began. Why only share parts of the recording? Shouta decided to step in on this one. Because despite the fact that we conducted this to ease your concerns, that doesn't entitle you all to private details about Midoriya's life that he may not want shared. Shouta spat. Ida seemed to recoil a bit at the harsh tone, but most of the class showed guilt, likely also wanting to know everything that was said. We are letting you listen to all the relevant questions and answers. Please know that if you have questions, we will answer to the best of our ability for any clarification. Masa explained. He started the recording. Please state your full name for the record. Midoriya Izuku. There were small gasps at the sound of Midoriya's voice over the recording. Where do you attend school? UA High School. What made you decide to apply to UA? The heroics course, the proximity to my home, and the school policies. What made you decide you wanted to be a hero? I didn't decide. Shouta saw confused expressions, and he honestly couldn't blame the kids. That had confused him as well at the time. Bakugo, Shouta noticed, had a brief look of pride on his face. If he blinked, he would have missed it, though, as it was there 1 second, and gone the next. Can you elaborate on that, please? Yes, I can. That got a few chuckles. What do you mean you didn't decide you wanted to be a hero? Heroics and saving people has always been my dream, Detective. I never had a choice in that. A somber quiet overtook the room at that. Shouta saw Ashido pull her knees to her chest and hug them, much like Asui was doing. Kirishima's hands were shaking a bit, along with Ida's. How do you feel about living in the dorms? I love it. It's an escape compared to home. What does that mean? Kaminari questioned softly, a bit of warble to his voice. Sero had placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, and the two had their eyes cast to the floor. That's not our place to say. It holds no relevance to you. Shouta responded dryly. To be completely honest, he's not sure why Nedzu kept that question in at all. You and Bakugo went to school together growing up. You've known each other a long time, even have a rivalry today. What happened to cause the rift between you?" Shouta saw the moment Bakugo froze, the second his name was mentioned. The rest of the students seemed a bit surprised hearing Midoriya scoff at the word rival. Eyes darting over to Nedzu, he saw his boss's eyes locked on Bakugo and his ear twitched. Not good. Not good at all. What the hell was Nedzu thinking? "Well, Detective, I guess that would be my 15 years of being a worthless, quirkless child in his eyes and the eyes of everyone else. Being relentlessly bullied, tormented, used for quirk practice and suicide baited for a decade tends to cause a rift. Does that answer your damn question?" "What? There's no way that can be true, right? But Midoriya has a quirk." Just about every student was yelling at this point. Granted, this was a shocking revelation, but this was getting out of hand fast. "Enough," he barked, flashing his quirk and silencing the class immediately. This just became a damn mess. How the hell was he going to explain this to the kid? The problem child knew they had to share things with the students, but I doubt he expected his issues with Bakugo to be revealed as well as his past quirklessness. Speaking of Bakugo, his eyes were blown wide, and the kid had gone seriously pale. Kirishima broke the silence from across the room. "Bakubro, is it true?" He didn't say a word, but that was answer enough, it seemed. The whole room's atmosphere changed, and not just from the chill from Todoroki's quirk. Each student seemed to be reflecting on what Midoriya had confessed. Kirishima's hands were shaking worse than before. Several students had tears forming in their eyes. Yaoyorozu had used her quirk to make a few boxes of tissues to pass around the room. Uraraka's jaw had dropped, and Ida was staring at his hands in what appeared to be shame. They were all shaken as the principal's voice rang out, and the recording continued. "We can discuss this more in depth later, but for now let's move on to discuss your notebooks. I am rather curious, Midoriya-kun. Why did you decide to start compiling these?" "Growing up quirkless, I was always fascinated with quirks, how they function. It started as just a hobby, a childish whim to dream up what quirk I might get. Eventually, it became a tool. Despite not gaining a quirk like I had hoped, I held on to my dream of becoming a hero anyway. I knew that picking apart others' weaknesses would allow me a chance at taking them down." "And have you ever used your skills in analysis to harm?" "Yes, I've used analysis during our encounters with villains. I've also used my analysis to help me defeat my classmates during class exercises, which at times they have been harmed." "I see. And during these class exercises, is your goal to hurt your classmates?" "No. The goal is to beat them through sparring, or other means. I've never wanted to harm any of my classmates seriously, or outside the parameters of school-sanctioned activities." "For what purpose did you write analysis of your classmates in these notebooks?" "A few reasons. For starters, I wanted to be able to effectively develop strategies against them for class. Not only that, I wanted to understand their strengths, so I could plan out team strategies as well. Lastly, I wanted to understand their weaknesses, to help them develop ways to combat them and improve." At this point, several students were outright sobbing. Mina had tears running down her face. Her breathing was fast and unsteady. Kirishima placed an arm around her, despite the tears spilling from his eyes as well. "Oh no," Uraraka whispered in horror, but everyone ignored her as the recording just kept going. Tsukauchi was the one questioning this time. "Midoriya, have you ever given your analysis to anyone?" "Yes, but only Shoto. I gave him an analysis I did of his quirk to help him get comfortable using his fire side." "Okay, Midoriya. Have you ever sold your analysis to anyone?" "No." "Are you in any way working with or aiding the League of Villains?" "No." "Are you a traitor?" "No, I am not." Although he'd been stressing over what could be going on downstairs, Izuku still found himself somewhat relaxed in his teacher's apartment. Getting the time to just read was exactly what he needed to calm down after the whole day. He was curled up on the opposite end of the couch as Yamada-sensei, and he just finished the book he'd borrowed. Izuku stood up and walked back over to the bookshelf he'd gotten this one from, to return it when Yamada-sensei spoke up, startling him enough to spin around. "You finished that already, listener?" "Oh, yes, sensei. It was really good. Thank you for letting me borrow it." Izuku bowed slightly, and he heard the man chuckle. "Kiddo, you don't need to thank anyone. We're neighbors now. You're more than welcome to read any of the books we have anytime you want." Izuku sputtered. "What? Wait, really? You wouldn't mind?" "You're welcome here whenever, even if Sho and I aren't home. Although, unless classes are happening, usually one of us is here," the man said, smiling. Izuku couldn't believe how kind his teachers were being. He felt a warmth spread through his chest at the idea of coming over here again. "Thank you. I really appreciate that, sensei," he replied softly, feeling his face heat up a bit. Yamada just waved it off and gestured for Izuku to sit back down. By the time Izuku got back to the couch, the door to the apartment opened, revealing Aizawa, with Shoto trailing behind him. After the rough day he'd had, Izuku couldn't hold back a smile, seeing Shoto. He was so glad he'd agreed to come help. The other boy seemed a bit tense, and his eyes were flitting around the apartment, taking everything in. When their eyes met, though, his features softened, and Izuku felt a tightness in his chest loosen, just a bit at that. Turning to Aizawa, Izuku readied himself to ask how it went, but Yamada beat him to it. "Sho, how'd it go?" Aizawa just sighed heavily, and that did nothing to ease the building panic that only grew the longer he took to answer. He turned to look at Izuku, and he felt his lungs stop working. Aizawa was tough to read at times, but right now, he looked like he really did not want to tell Izuku something. Not good. "Just tell me," he said without even realizing it. Aizawa nodded. "Your classmates now all know that you are innocent," he started. "Okay, well, that's not so bad. That's what we all wanted. However, well, shit. They also know about your past with Bakugo, and that you were quirkless." He didn't hear anything else being said, as all the sound in the room disappeared. "This can't be happening. This can't be happening. This can't be happening." He repeated the mantra in his head, even as his breathing became erratic. "Izuku, you need to breathe slowly. Take deep breaths," he heard someone say. He couldn't tell who it was, just that the voice was comforting. He hoped they'd speak again. Something shifted next to him, and all of a sudden, he felt someone take his hand gently. "I'm right here, Izuku," the voice spoke up again. "I promised that I wouldn't go anywhere." The hand holding his was tracing slow circles. Izuku focused in on it. Before long, his breathing had slowed, and he looked up to see who was next to him. Shoto, Izuku rasped. Shoto just smiled softly at him and squeezed his hand again. "Good job, Izuku. I'm right here." Leaning forward, Izuku fell into Shoto's chest and felt a warm arm wrap around him, pulling them closer together. Safe. They'd deal with the rest later. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 10 of Innocent Until Proven Guilty. Chapter 11 will be up next. I would love to hear your thoughts and reactions. I know a lot of people were anticipating a class reveal, right? And so this is the class getting the information and recognizing that they were wrong. But Izuku's not there and present for it, right? Aizawa giving him the space that he needs to relax after the day, not making him be there and be present to have to listen to his own interrogation again. So please let me know your reactions, what you thought, how Aizawa and Naomasa and Nedzu all relayed this information to them, right? And how it was all handled. Any opinions that you have or feelings you had while listening to it. I would love to hear them. The fic, of course, is located on AO3, is still being written up to 15 chapters by the time I'm posting this. So I hope if you have a huge interest in it and you'd like to read ahead, you're more than welcome to. But you can also await chapter updates here on the channel, as I'll be continuing to post new chapters with recordings here as well. I appreciate all the amazing support from each and every one of you. Thank you all so much for listening.